Hey, dear friends, in this story I'm going to tell you how me and someone special tried building something real, even with all the fears pulling us back. Get comfy, grab some warm tea or coffee, light a candle if you're into cozy vibes. It's going to be honest, I promise, and a bit uneasy, because life doesn't always hand out easy answers. This is about learning to be truthful with him and with myself. After that night when me and Nolan decided we wanted to be open, I felt both lighter and wound up tight. We were closer than ever, but his words about people knowing about us kept spinning in my head. I'm Aiden, 26, an editor at a publishing house in Albany, New York. My life's always been quiet: work, books, walks in the park. But Nolan, a history teacher at the local college, turned everything upside down, and I didn't regret a single second. The next Saturday, we planned to meet at Washington Park. It was early December, and the air already smelled like snow. I got there a bit early, pacing by the fountain they'd shut off for winter, wondering how to tell Nolan I was ready but still scared. He showed up in a dark jacket and a gray scarf that was slipping off his neck. "You look like you're plotting an escape," he said with a grin, fixing his scarf. I laughed. "Just checking if the fountain's frozen, but now you're here, so I'm not going anywhere." We walked along the paths, where leaves had turned to crunchy frost. Nolan told me how his students turned in the worst essays of the semester, and I griped about my coworker forgetting to save edits before a deadline. But the talk got heavier fast. I stopped by a bench and looked at him. "You really want people to know about us?" I asked, feeling my throat tighten up. He nodded, meeting my eyes. "Not tomorrow, but yeah, I want to live without hiding, because you matter to me more than anyone's opinion." I sat down and he slid in next to me, so close our shoulders touched. His hand found mine, fingers lacing together, and I felt warmth despite the chill. "I'm worried someone at work might start whispering," I admitted, staring at our hands. He squeezed my palm. "Let them whisper. We're not doing anything wrong, we're just together, and that's what counts." His voice was calm but solid, and I knew he was right, even if the fear didn't vanish. We sat quietly, and I noticed his breath turning to mist in the cold air. My hand rested on his knee, just to feel closer, and he smiled, not looking away. It was small, but my heart beat faster, like we were sharing a secret no one could take. "You make me braver," I said softly, and he replied, "You make me feel like I'm home, even on this freezing bench." When we got up, he suggested hitting a café nearby to warm up. We grabbed hot chocolate and sat by the window, where steam from our mugs fogged the glass. His leg brushed mine under the table, and I felt a warmth that wasn't just from the drink. We talked about little things: how he wants to take his students to a museum, how I'm planning to finish a detective novel. But every look, every accidental touch, felt like a promise we'd make it through, no matter what. As we left, Nolan looked at me and said, "We'll do this step by step, together, okay?" I nodded. Step by step, but only with you by my side. And I knew this was just the start. After our talk in the park, I started feeling like me and Nolan were on the edge of something new, but we still didn't know how to take that first step. His words about living without secrets kept echoing in my head, and I caught myself thinking I wanted it just as much as he did. But fear still clung to me, especially when I imagined telling coworkers or friends. The next Friday, I suggested meeting at his place to skip the cafe noise. I showed up with a bag of pastries from a bakery, hoping it'd ease my nerves. He opened the door in a dark t-shirt and jeans, with that soft smile that always made my heart race. "You brought food? Now I'm definitely not letting you leave," he said, grabbing the bag and nodding toward the kitchen. I laughed. "Figured if I fed you, you'd complain less about me being late." We settled on his couch, a plate of pastries between us. Nolan put on some old comedy on the TV, but we barely paid attention. He shared how his students got into a debate about whether Napoleon was a hero, and I grumbled about my boss mixing up deadlines again. But I could tell we were both waiting to bring up something real. I set my pastry down and turned to him. "I keep thinking about what you said about being open," I started, staring at his hands resting on a cushion. He nodded, scooting closer. "Me too, and I don't want to push, but I think we're ready to try, one step at a time." His words were so honest I felt warmth spread through my chest. I took his hand, feeling his fingers tighten around mine just a bit. I want to start small, maybe tell a couple friends, I said, my voice quieter than usual. He smiled, his eyes warm and steady. That's a solid start, and I'll be there to back you up even if someone starts asking dumb questions. We laughed, and the tension eased a little. We sat closer than we needed to, and I noticed his knee pressing against mine. My hand rested on his shoulder, fingers slowly tracing to his neck, and I felt him relax under my touch. He turned, and our eyes locked, long and quiet, like we were talking without saying a word. His hand found my waist, lingering there, and I felt a warmth run down my spine. You make this easier, he whispered, and I replied, only because you're here or I'd probably bolt. The movie had ended, but we didn't care. We talked about how we might spend winter break, maybe a trip to the mountains or just wandering snowy Albany. His fingers stayed laced with mine, and his warmth made everything feel more solid. At one point, he leaned in and his forehead brushed mine for just a second, but it was enough to make my breath catch. We'll figure this out, right? I asked softly. He nodded. We're already figuring it out, just by holding on to each other. When I got ready to leave, he walked me to the door, his hand resting on my wrist. Tell your friends when you feel ready, I'm not in a rush, he said with a smile. I nodded. I'm ready because you're with me, and that changes everything. After our night with pastries, I felt more sure of myself, even though the idea of talking to friends still gave me a slight knot in my stomach. Nolan was there, and his steady support made it easier, but I knew I had to take the first step on my own. I decided to start with Caitlin, my friend from work, who was always open-minded and never cared for gossip. The next Saturday, I invited Caitlin for lunch at a small café near the office. Nolan offered to come along, but I wanted to do it myself, to test my own strength. That morning, he was sitting on his couch, flipping through a book, watching me with a soft smile. You're nervous like you're about to take a test, he said, setting the book down and sliding closer. I sighed. Maybe I am, but I want this to be right, to show people how much you mean to me. He took my hand, his fingers warm and steady. Caitlin's a good person, she'll get it, and if she doesn't, I'll still be here, he said, his voice calm like he was ready to hold my hand through any talk. I nodded, feeling his words lift some weight off my shoulders. His hand lingered on my wrist, and the warmth of his touch settled my racing heart. We sat like that for another minute, just looking at each other, and I knew it was worth trying for this. At the cafe, Caitlin was already waiting at a table, skimming the menu. She wore a bright sweater that stood out against the gray day. You're late as usual, she said with a grin, putting the menu down. I sat across from her. Sorry, had to dodge a few puddles, the rain's not in a great mood today. We ordered sandwiches and coffee, and I started talking about work to build up my courage. But she picked up on my nerves and asked, okay, what's on your mind? You look like you're about to confess to stealing cookies. I took a deep breath and met her eyes. I'm seeing someone, and it's serious, it's a guy named Nolan, I said, the words spilling out faster than I expected. She raised her eyebrows but smiled. For real? That's awesome, tell me about him, he must be special if you're glowing like this. Her reaction was so easygoing that I relaxed and started talking about Nolan, how he laughs, how he loves old movies, how he makes coffee in the morning. We talked for almost an hour, and I felt freer with every word. Later, I went back to Nolan, who was waiting at his place. He was sitting in the kitchen with a mug of tea, and I told him everything. She wants to meet you, I said, sitting down next to him. He smiled, shifting so our knees touched. Then bring her over sometime, I'll even try not to debate history at the first meeting. We laughed, and his hand covered mine, fingers lacing together. I felt the warmth coming from him and leaned in, our shoulders brushing. His breathing was close, and I got this slight flutter, like we were alone in our own world again. We talked about how we might spend the weekend, maybe catch a movie or just walk around town. His hand stayed in mine, and every gesture felt like it said more than words could. You did it, I'm proud of you, he said quietly, and I replied, only because you were with me even if you weren't there. After talking to Caitlin, I felt like I'd dropped a heavy backpack I'd been carrying for months. She took it all so easily, and it gave me confidence that me and Nolan were on the right track. But I knew we needed more time together, just the two of us, to feel our connection grow without the world getting in the way. The next Friday, Nolan invited me over, suggesting we have a quiet night with no plans. I showed up with a bottle of cider we both liked and a couple books I found at a used bookstore. He opened the door in a dark blue shirt, sleeves rolled up, his hair falling slightly over his forehead. "You look like you're trying to charm me with cider," he said with a grin, taking the bottle. I laughed. "If cider does the trick, I'll bring it every week." We settled in his living room, where only a table lamp was on, casting a soft glow across the walls. Nolan poured the cider into 2 mugs, and we sat on the couch, so close our knees touched right away. He put on some quiet music, old jazz that made everything feel even cozier. We started talking about work. He told me how one of his students tried arguing Vikings discovered America, and I shared how I accidentally sent an author a snarky comment instead of a draft. But I could tell we both wanted more than just small talk. I turned to him, setting my mug on the table. "You know, after talking to Caitlin, I realized I want to be even more open with you," I said, looking at his hands resting on the couch. He slid closer, his eyes warm and focused. "You're already open, but I'm listening. Tell me what's on your mind." I took a breath and went on. "I want us to stop being afraid to be ourselves, even in little ways, like holding hands outside or laughing louder than usual." He nodded, his hand covering mine, fingers slowly lacing together. "I want that too, and with you, I feel like it's possible even if it's scary sometimes." His words were so simple, but they hit something deep inside. I leaned in, and our shoulders pressed together firmly. My hand moved to his neck, fingers lingering, feeling the warmth of his skin. He turned, and our faces were so close I could feel his breath, soft and warm. His hand found my waist, gripping it lightly, like he needed to know I wasn't going anywhere. "You make me braver than I ever thought I could be," he whispered, and I replied, "Only because you make me feel like I'm home." We stayed like that, barely moving, and I felt his fingers trace slowly down my back. My hand rested on his shoulder, sliding down, sensing him relax under my touch. It was quiet, but every gesture felt like a conversation full of meaning. His forehead brushed mine, and I heard his breathing get a little deeper. "Is it okay if we just stay like this?" he asked softly. I nodded. "It's better than okay because it's with you." The music kept playing, but we hardly noticed. We talked about how we might spend New Year's, maybe cook dinner at home or hit the skating rink. His hand rested on my knee, and I felt a warmth that made everything brighter. When I looked at him, his eyes were so open I leaned closer, and our cheeks touched for a second. "We'll make this work, right?" I asked. He smiled. "We're already making it work, and I don't want it to stop." After that night with cider, I felt like me and Nolan had gotten even closer, like every talk and look was stitching us tighter together. I kept thinking about how I wanted to share more than just evenings with him, maybe even plans for years down the road. But I knew thoughts like that needed time, and I liked how we were moving slow but steady. The next Saturday, Nolan suggested having dinner at his place. He said he wanted to cook something himself, and I couldn't miss the chance to see him at the stove. I showed up with a bottle of red wine and a bag of fresh herbs I grabbed on the way. He opened the door in a black shirt, top button undone, with a towel slung over his shoulder. "You brought wine? Now I really can't burn dinner," he said with a grin, letting me in. I laughed. "If you burn it, I'm still staying, just for your company." The kitchen smelled like garlic and rosemary, and Nolan was messing with pasta while I chopped tomatoes for a salad. We chatted about silly stuff, how his students tried passing off old essays as new, how I almost deleted an important file at work. But I noticed him looking at me sometimes, a little longer than he needed to, and it made my heart beat faster. When he came over to check the salad bowl, his hand brushed mine, and he didn't pull away. "You're making the kitchen a dangerous place," I said quietly, feeling the warmth of his fingers. He smiled, stepping closer. "Only if you keep distracting me with your wine and that smile." We sat down to eat at a small table he'd set up with more care than I expected from him. The lamp's light fell softly, and we were so close our knees touched under the table. I poured us wine, and we clinked glasses, laughing when I almost spilled mine. The talk got deeper when I asked, "You ever think about where we'll be in a year or two?" He set his glass down and looked at me, his eyes so open I felt a flutter inside. "I have, and I see us together, maybe in a house full of books with a dog," he said, his voice warm like the wine. I leaned closer, my hand resting on his, feeling his fingers tighten around mine. His other hand found my shoulder, sliding slowly to my neck, and I felt warmth spread across my skin. We went quiet, but the air between us was alive, full of things we didn't need to say. I shifted forward, and our foreheads touched, his breath warm and close, making my heart pound. My hands settled on his waist, fingers lingering, sensing him inch toward me. "You make me want all of it right now," I whispered, and he replied, "Then take your time, I'm not going anywhere." After dinner, we moved to the couch, leaving dishes for later. He sat so close our shoulders pressed together, and his hand rested on my knee, tracing slowly. I turned, and his face was near enough I could feel the warmth of his cheek. My hand slid down his back, pausing at his lower back, and he relaxed, leaning into me slightly. "Is it okay if I want to be even closer?" he asked softly, and I nodded. "It's more than okay, it's exactly what I want too." We talked until midnight, sharing thoughts about the future, trips we could take, books we'd read, how we might spruce up his apartment. His fingers stayed locked with mine, and every look felt like a promise we were building something real. After dinner at Nolan's, I started noticing how every evening we spent together left a mark on my heart, like we were building something that wouldn't ever stop. I kept thinking about being with him not just now, but years from now, sharing everything. Morning coffee, long winter nights. It scared me a little, but it also felt like I'd finally found where I belonged. The next Friday, I suggested we hang out at my place. My apartment was simpler than his, but I wanted him to feel as comfortable as I did at his. I bought some candles and a couple bottles of beer, thinking it'd add some warmth. He showed up in a dark green sweater that made his eyes pop, holding a bag of chips. "You serious with the chips?" "I was trying to be romantic," I said, opening the door. He laughed. "Chips are peak romance, you just haven't figured out their magic yet." We settled in my living room, where I lit the candles, and their light fell softly on the walls. I put on some calm music, just guitar chords so it wouldn't distract us. We sat on the couch and Nolan slid close, our knees touching right away. He told me how his coworker tried setting up a quiz for students that went totally wrong, and I griped about my boss forgetting how our server works again. But I could tell we both wanted the talk to go somewhere deeper. I set my beer down and turned to him. "I keep thinking about what you said about a house and a dog." I started, looking at his hands resting on the couch. He smiled, his fingers finding mine, lacing together slowly. "I think about it too, and with you, it feels less like a dream and more like something we could actually do." I leaned closer, feeling the warmth of his words. "You really see us like that? Together, for the long haul?" I asked, my voice quieter than usual. He nodded, his eyes so honest. "I do, and I want it even if we have to figure out a bunch of little things along the way." His hand rested on my shoulder, fingers sliding to my neck, and I felt a shiver, like his touch sparked something inside. I moved closer, our faces so near I could feel his breath, warm and steady. My hand settled on his waist, lingering, sensing him shift toward me. His fingers traced down my back, and I heard his breathing get a little deeper. "You make me feel like anything's possible," I whispered, and he replied, "Only because you're here, and I don't want to be anywhere else." We went quiet, but the silence was full of meaning. His hand stayed on my back, and I ran my fingers along his shoulder, feeling the warmth of his sweater. Our foreheads touched, and my heart pounded in my throat. His hand slid lower, to my side, squeezing gently, like he wanted to hold on to the moment. "Is it okay if I want to stay like this for a long time?" he asked softly. I nodded. "It's better than okay because I don't want you to leave." We talked half the night, sharing plans, maybe a winter trip to Vermont or hosting friends for a night. His fingers stayed locked with mine, and every look felt like a promise we wouldn't let go. I leaned closer, and our cheeks brushed, warm and close, for a second longer than needed. "We'll make this happen, right?" I asked. He smiled. We're already making it happen, and I want it to last forever. After that night at my place, I felt like me and Nolan were ready for something bigger, but fear still hung on to me, especially when I thought about how far we'd go. His words about a house and a dog kept echoing in my head, but I started wondering if we had the strength to be open not just with each other, but with everyone else. It wasn't just a choice. It felt like we were standing at the edge of something unknown, and it made my stomach tighten. The next Saturday, Nolan suggested meeting somewhere different, not a café or home, but an old theater on the edge of Albany showing a black and white movie. He said he wanted something out of the ordinary, and I agreed, even though a quiet worry settled in my chest. I got there early, pacing by the entrance where the posters were faded from time, trying to figure out what was making me so uneasy. Nolan showed up in a dark coat, his scarf flapping in the cold wind, looking more serious than usual. "Think we'll survive this old movie?" he asked with a smile, but I could tell his eyes were searching mine. I shrugged. "If you're next to me, I'm willing to take the risk, even if it's boring as hell." We sat in the theater, where only a few people were scattered around, and the lights dimmed slowly. The movie was about a love that broke every rule, and I felt Nolan shift closer, his shoulder pressing against mine. His hand found mine in the dark, fingers locking together, and the warmth of his palm calmed me, even though my heart was beating too fast. "I want us to be that brave, like them," he whispered, his voice nearly lost in the sounds from the screen. I gripped his hand tighter. "I do too, but I'm scared some people will turn away from us, and it's heavier than I want to admit." He turned to me, and even in the faint light, I could see his gaze, so honest it took my breath away. "I know, and I'm scared too, but I'd rather be scared with you than pretend to be someone I'm not," he said, and his words felt like warm light in a cold room. My hand rested on his knee, fingers lingering, feeling warmth through the fabric of his pants. His hand slid to my shoulder, and I sensed him lean in, his breath brushing my neck, soft and close. It was a small gesture, but it meant so much, like we were holding each other in this weird, anxious moment. When the movie ended, we stepped outside, where soft snow was falling. Nolan took my hand, not hiding, even as people passed by, and I felt a lump in my throat. "I want this to be our life. No looking over our shoulders, no fear," he said, his voice shaky but steady. I looked at him, snow settling in his hair, and nodded. "Then let's do it, together, and screw what anyone else thinks." We walked to his place, his hand still in mine, and the warmth of his fingers made everything feel real. At home, we sat on the couch, and he slid so close our knees touched. My hand rested on his back, fingers tracing the fabric of his sweater, and I felt him relax. His hand found my wrist, and his breath was warm near my shoulder, almost grazing my skin. "You're my everything," I said softly, and he replied, "You're my home, and I want to stay here forever." Friends, what would you do when love asks you to be braver than you feel ready for? Have you ever faced a moment where fear and belief in the future walk together? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I really want to hear what you think.